Thank you, Juma, for the kind introduction. I'm very excited to be sharing the opportunities in the square kilometer array today with the young audience. It is very unfortunate that I can only see 3 participants in this Google Meet. So I guess the audience is mostly on Facebook Live. So I will share my screen now. Okay, so let us begin. So today I am going to talk about the square kilometer array, and this is a project, international project with many participants from different countries, and it is going to push the boundaries or frontiers of science. And here there are 2 logos. One is for the Square Kilometer Array International collaboration, and the other one, if you can see my cursor, the other one is for the SKA India collaboration. So I work at the Indian Institute of Astrophysics in Bangalore, and I basically work on theoretical aspects of the square kilometer array, predicting what kind of observables we can measure in the future. So let us first, I will begin by describing to you what the square kilometer array is. So let us see what it is. So as the name suggests, it is an array of antenna, and the array of antenna consists of 2 kinds of antenna. First is the dish antenna, which we are all familiar with from our television sets at home. So it is expected that when the SKA construction is over, we will have about 3,000 dish antenna, and each of them will be 15 meters wide. Then we will also have 1 million different kind of antenna called the aperture array antenna. So this picture here shows the dish antenna, which are this dish pictures here, and the aperture array are the ones which are on this left lower corner. So this is going to be an array of antenna, and eventually when the construction is over, it will be spread over 3,000 kilometers. It will extend all the way up to 3,000 kilometers from the central location of the antenna. So it's going to be really big. It's going to be the largest radio telescope in the world. Then the next thing is what it will do is it will receive radio signals. So we are, I think almost everybody in the audience will be familiar with radio signals because it is very much a part of our daily lives. So the radio signals, the frequency or the wavelength. So we talk about frequency or wavelength of the radio signal. I will describe it a little bit in the later part also, but I can summarize here. I summarize here what the frequencies are. So the square kilometer array will be built in different stages. The first stage will have radio antenna which will receive signal from 50 to 350 megahertz. So just to relate this to our daily life, you can remember that FM radio is around 90 to 100 megahertz. So it is going to be similar to those ranges. Then the second phase will cover 350 megahertz to 14 gigahertz. And the third one will extend up to 30 gigahertz. So this is planned to be built. And if we combine all the collecting area of the dishes, it will cover 1 square kilometer, combined collecting area, the signals that it can collect. will be like 1 kilometer across and 1 kilometer, 1 by 1 kilometer. So the name comes from, the square kilometer array comes from this fact that it will have a collecting area of 1 kilometer square. Okay, so then we can ask, where is it going to be? So it is going to be located in two places. First is Western Australia and the second is in South Africa. So these places have been chosen because they are very radio quiet, in the sense that there are few people, human beings living there, and so there is no interference. There is limited interference from human related radio sources, and they are very far, they are very remote, and the atmosphere is good in those locations, which means that the signals coming from external, the signals that we want to collect, which are the ones which are coming from outside the earth, from the cosmos, will reach us and not get absorbed by the atmosphere. So these are the conditions that are used to select the locations. Then we can discuss, what I would like to tell you is when is it going to be built? So here is a brief, this 3-component timeline of the SKA. So the idea of constructing this huge radio telescope was conceived in the 1990s. Astronomers wanted to probe the cosmos, ask questions about the cosmos, and so the idea was conceived. But then from conceiving the idea to coming to a stage when we can start construction, it has taken these, say, 25 years. 2021, this year, it is supposed to start construction. And construction for the one in Australia, which is the low frequency array. And we expect that maybe the first data or the first measurement of signals from it will come, say, around 2027. So I have put a question mark. So the word first light is typically used for the first observations taken by an instrument. So I put a question mark here because this may get delayed and so on, depending on various conditions. And the final full construction of the SKA will be several years from this 2027. Okay, so who are building this square kilometer array? So various people are involved in it. So the first are of course the astronomers who want to study the cosmos, the entire universe, different aspects of it, and scientists. And so they have their questions, and based on their questions they have requirements of instruments, and so the idea comes from them. Then we have engineers who will who will be experts in building the instruments. Then we have data scientists, because the signals, how to transfer the signals. So you can see that the volume of signal data is going to be very large. So how efficiently and how fast can you transfer the data will require expertise in handling it. So the data scientists who are part of the construction. Then thirdly, we have policymakers. So basically people who will decide how to go about it, where will the money come from, and so on, various kinds of policy. And so these are all people from various, say, 20 countries, around 20 countries. So this construction, the square kilometer array, is going to push the boundaries of knowledge, and knowledge will be in terms of in science, technology, and the third thing, which is also very important, is collaboration among people. It will teach, it has been teaching from the conception of the idea, it has been teaching the people involved how to work together, how to collaborate together and carry forward an idea. So these are the details about where and so on. Next, I come to the very important question of why is it being built. Okay, so why are we doing this huge exercise of collecting people and constructing such a facility? Okay, so the why starts with each one of us, the inquiring person in each one of us. So with this picture, I hope to convey the sense of wonder when we look out at the sky, and there is I think there is a child in each one of us, and it is nice to have a companion to look at the sky. So we see stars and various objects in the sky. Then there is the other kind of looking, which involves looking at various equations, right? So we have a simple equation which we see in school here. Then we have a higher level equations which we will encounter learn in physics, in college, and so on. So each of these equations and the view that we see makes us wonder about the universe, about nature, and to understand, it makes us want to understand our place in the universe. So we look and then we wonder. Then the wonder turns into questions for us. So we formulate specific questions for which we want to seek answers for those questions. Okay. Then in order to seek the answers, not sometimes, but just thinking is not enough. We have to devise methods and techniques which will help us find the answers. So by seeking the answers, we get the answers, and then it fills us with wonder. We have understood something, and after understanding, that will lead us to more questions and more wonder that we want to seek out. So it's a cycle. After getting the answer, we go back to wonder, and this process, it has been it goes on in our minds. So let me now speak a little bit about the questions and seeking answers. And seeking answer is where the SKA will fit in. Okay, so let me just outline the big questions of the universe that we want to ask. So one question is, of course, when we look out into the sky or we look around us, we ask what kinds of different matter are there. So here I have listed 3 words. So we have baryons, and baryons are what we are all familiar with, of which we are all made up. So our bodies are made of it, the sun, the air, and so on, they are made of these baryons. By this, I include all the atoms, molecules, and inside the atoms, protons, electrons, and so on. They are all included under this term baryons. Then there are also astrophysics. Study of astrophysics has told us that far away from us, or maybe near us, there is an invisible kind of matter which we do not see directly, but which we can sense by its gravitational interaction with the baryons. Then there is also dark energy, which we don't know much about. So these we want to know what kinds of matter are there, what are their properties, what are we made of, what is the universe made of. This is a big question. The second question is, how do they interact? So suppose there is a person next to me, and me and that person interacting means either we speak to each other, or suppose that person and me, we throw a ball at each other, we exchange the ball, and we keep exchanging the ball. That means we are interacting. So this simple idea of exchanging some kind of a ball has been taken over in very fundamental physics, and the known forces of nature right now are explained in terms of exchanging a particle, and you would have heard of this in other talks or will be hearing. I'm not sure if you have heard of it, but you will be hearing of this. In terms of the kind of interactions are at very short distances, two particles which are close to each other, they can interact by exchanging a type of particle which connects them by a weak force, or another force called a strong force. So these two forces act on the short scales. Then on the large scales, when two objects are far away from each other, they can interact by exchanging electromagnetic force, or they can exchange a photon between them, keep exchanging photon, and they interact by that. Or gravitational force, which we all know, you can exchange gravitons and you can be interacting. Okay, so all these have come from physics, the theories have come from physics, and they are being tested. So the theory has been tested, there's a lot of success, but we are always pushing the limits of the success and testing the theories to more and more extreme conditions. So what is relevant for my talk today is Einstein's theory of gravity, and this has been, I am not going to go into details of Einstein's theory, but the Einstein's theory has been proven to be valid at scales, length scales or distances that we are all familiar with at the level of the solar system, but is it valid at the very large scales and when the gravitational condition is very, very strong. So these are questions which are open. Then the third kind of question I have listed here is the history of the universe. So what was the universe like in the past, and how far back in the past can we understand the universe based on the laws of nature that we have built today. So fourth big question is there life beyond the earth? So these are the kind of big questions that we want to ask, and we want to seek questions to this. Okay. So in this slide, how do we seek the answers to these kind of questions? That is what I am writing here. So the seeking answers comes as a back and forth between theoretical ideas and observations or experiments. So our ideas and imaginations, we convert them into theories, and usually in physics we will convert them into equations, and those equations we want to test. We don't just believe an equation because it is nice looking. We have to confront it with experimental data and see whether that equation holds or not. So in order to do that, we do experiments and observations. I use these two words because observations, when we talk about astrophysics and the universe, we cannot really repeat experiments. We can only observe the signals as they are coming from space. Okay, so the observation can be, the process of doing the observation involves receiving signals, and as of now with the physics that we know, there are three kinds of signals that we can receive. There is light, electromagnetic waves, light. There are gravitational waves, which you would have also heard of in another talk. There is neutrinos, and I have not listed cosmic rays, but okay, you can be considered as part of neutrinos. So I am going to be focusing on light. Okay, so let us discuss a bit about the signal. All right. So when we look at the night sky, for example, with our eye, we will see, for example, we see the stars in this slide. I have shown the Orion constellation. We see something when we receive light from it. That means there are these stars and they are giving light, and the light has taken some time, but it is reaching our eyes and we are seeing it. So I have put the seeing in quotation because the light that we receive, our eyes need not be the only instrument with which we see. We can see with other instruments, which not necessarily our eyes. So here I am showing the Orion constellation again, which is this as seen with our eye. Now if I change it to the infrared, if I use a filter and cut out all other waves and I see in infrared, which is slightly longer wavelength, then we see this kind of an image. So if we had only believed with our own eyes, we would have thought that okay, there are these stars and there is nothing else. However, this infrared image is telling us that there is a lot of material out there which is giving infrared radiation, which not necessarily in the optical. So our eyes are not able to see. So we all learn in school that the light comes in a huge range of wavelengths, from very short wavelength gamma rays all the way up to very long radio wavelengths. And you would have seen maybe even shorter wavelength, even longer wavelength than what I have shown here in gravitational waves. So the electromagnetic spectrum. So we can do experiments or observations of the cosmos using these different kinds of frequencies. Okay, just to connect to SKA, the square kilometer array. So we are interested in this. If you can see my cursor, we are interested in this range, which is roughly from 1 centimeter to 1 meter wavelength range. Okay, so again, since we are going to radio wavelengths, which is this is just a curious picture of Jupiter, how different it looks when you look at it in visible light and in radio wavelengths. So the emissions, the various physical processes that are going on in the Jupiter and around it, the material which is around it. So by looking at different wavelengths, we understand the object much better. We have a better understanding of the physical processes going on. Okay, let's come back to the square kilometer array. And basically I want to very briefly go through what kind of physics are we going to study by using the square kilometer array. Alright, so I mentioned already that the square kilometer array is going to start from around 1 centimeter, which is, I'm depicting it by this, and 1.5 meter at the 30 gigahertz wavelength. So we can first do a survey of what kind of objects are there in the cosmos which are going to emit these kind of light rays. Okay. So let's do a quick survey of that. So I have split the different kinds of sources here into two kinds. One is the sources from within our own galaxy, which is the Milky Way. So I am assuming that everybody is familiar with the solar system. The solar system is part of the Milky Way galaxy, and our Milky Way galaxy is part of a cluster of galaxies, and so on and so forth. It goes on from the very small length scales, the size of our solar system, out to very big size of the cosmos. So here is a artist depiction of something like the Milky Way. So it is consisting of many stars, and our location is shown here in this projected place in one of the arms. So the Milky Way has spiral arms where most of the material, stars and gas are located, and we are on one of the arms. So within this, our sun, planet and moon, we have already just now seen a picture of Jupiter. They all emit radio frequencies, radio light, and so by collecting that light we can understand them better. Then in between stars there is this interstellar medium between stars, which is basically gas. Most of it is hydrogen, there is carbon monoxide, some molecules, there is dust also. So these gases, they also emit radio waves, and so by collecting that we can understand what they are. Similarly, you may have all heard of supernova, a star explosion. So when a star explodes, there will be material that comes out, and those, again, the remains of the supernova, they can emit these radio waves. So then there are neutron stars, there are pulsars. Then we can go outside our galaxy, so far away, other galaxies, and those also can emit radio waves. Active galactic nuclei, quasars, these are names that you will encounter as sources. Then there are other sources which are for brief moments, they will emit and then stop emitting. So they are transient, so we can understand about these objects. Then the next one concerns the, so these are non-compact. So what I listed in the previous slide, they are all compact. The gas is not compact, of course, but there can be non-compact sources outside our galaxy also. So there is gas in between galactic intergalactic medium. I'm sorry about this nuclei. So in between two galaxies or three galaxies, for example, that intervening space has gas in them, and they also emit. Then the remaining 2 points that I have listed here, they are related to the history of the universe. We can observe the cosmic microwave background light, which is light emitted when the universe was very young. And you might have all heard that the universe is expanding. So as the universe expands, the wavelength becomes longer, and now today they fall, their wavelengths are in the starting part of the radio wavelengths. So some part of it is radio, and so this is the word redshift, means the wavelength gets stretched, and so this is the cosmic microwave background. Then the next important source of this emission is the hyperfine transition of hydrogen, which means, so for people in the audience who are in school, you may not know this hyperfine transition and so on, but you can think of this as neutral hydrogen. You know a hydrogen atom. So you have a proton and an electron, and they spin. So their spins can be aligned together or anti-aligned together, away from each other, and when there is a transition between that, it gives out a photon, and that photon has a wavelength of 21 centimeter or frequency 1.4 gigahertz. And so this light, because the universe has a lot of hydrogen, that hydrogen can make these transitions, and that light will get redshifted So 1.4 gigahertz already falls in the range that I talked about. Then it can extend beyond this. It will get redshifted, the wavelength will get longer, and it will be different stages of redshifting will be collected by the SKA. I seem to have overshot my time, so I will skip this slide, and I will take maybe just a few more minutes to talk about where is India in the square kilometer array consortium. Okay. So India is a major part of the SKA partnership, and in India various institutions are part of it. And so this is the logo, and this logo is designed by Kanaya Malakar and Kanan Datta, and it represents radio antennas, 3 radio antennas, and it also represents people coming together to chase our dream. So this is what they say. It's a very nice logo. So here in this slide I am showing in India where are the various institutions located. So you can see institutions from all over India are part of it. The main center is at NCRA, the National Center for Radio Astronomy, TIFR, in Pune. So this is the main center, and these other members are there from various institutes. I belong to Bangalore IIA. Okay, so I am coming towards the end of my presentation, and since I am told that this is part of the Women in Science International Day of Women presentation, I would like to list here voices of some women astronomers who are part of the SKA community. So you can find these, most of these in the SKA website, which I will show at the end. You can note it down and you can look there. So let us hear some of their voices. So Dr. Lourdes from Spain, she says that what she likes is that collaboration between different cultures, engineers, scientists, people doing policy, and also creative outreach activities. And this is the largest infrastructure to be built on Earth, and it can really change the way we do things. Then Professor Moushami Das, who is my colleague here at IIA, she says that she was inspired by the size and beauty of the night sky, and the fact that with science you can actually understand that beauty has been a deep motivation for her, and so that is why she has joined this research in this area. Then so Christina, you're discovering, so I think what she says is very important. You are discovering the enormous, magnificent universe, and you see that you are so small. Maybe your problems are not so important. And to the next generation of female astronomers, don't be discouraged. Always push for your goal. You can get it. Then we have Preeti Khurb from NCRA, and she says that she was fascinated by the stars of the Orion belt, which her father pointed out to her when she was a child, and she's constantly fascinated by her research. Then we have some more voices here. Dr. Charlotte Sobe, he says, if for women interested in astronomy, seek out other people who share your interests, especially in the form of mentors, and also start coding now. I think that's very good advice. Then Dr. Vanessa Moss, what she says is also important. We are swamped by data, and people can manipulate it to suit particular agendas. And being able to interpret the world around you based on evidence is really important. So science is about interpreting based on evidence. Then Dr. Rosie Bolton, she's a data scientist, and she connects the scientists to the data which is coming. She says, don't just drift into a single subject, really look at the different exciting careers that are available. Then we have Audrey Diggale. She says working in science every day is a learning curve. That's why it is so exciting. It is not monotonous. Then we have some voices from engineers. Dr. Anna Bonaldi, okay, she's an astronomer. She says, trust your instincts and don't give up. Trust that things are possible despite what other people around possibly being negative about it. Then we have 3 engineers that it is also interesting to hear what they say. If you are an excellent listener, a sports team captain, or good at maths, art, or even computer games, these skills are all applicable to modern engineering. I wish more young girls understood how valuable their natural skills are to this sector. Then Dr. Maria Grazia says, as a woman in engineering, it is nice to challenge the traditionally male world by using your female skills to resolve things. Then I think this is the last voice, Raji Chekala, who is in Australia. If you are good with numbers and enjoy hands-on jobs, engineering is the best field. So you can see that there is a recurring theme in all these different voices. So there is an awe and wonder of the universe, nature, and there is nurturing that, and there is a recurring theme that the diverse skills make it possible for you to pursue this as a career, and it is not necessarily the traditionally male kind of qualities which are important, but some of these people have listed their female skills as being greatly advantageous in their career. Okay, so that brings me to the end of my talk. So why is the SKA being built? Let us answer that question now after hearing what I have described. So the SKA is being built for the younger generation. It is now only being built. It will be ready for full exploitation of the data, say 10 years from now, and after that there will be many decades of useful exploration possible with it. So it will enable the younger generation to carry forward the exploration of the universe and to push the boundaries of human knowledge, collective human knowledge. Okay, so this is why the SKA is being built. So a lot of the material that I have covered can be found in this website. This collects very nicely different aspects of the SKA telescope. So please do go through it. So I would like to end my talk here. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry I have overshot my time.
Thanks a lot, ma'am, for this wonderful lecture. Now we will take up some questions. There is one question: how will SKA benefit the participant countries and the world at large?
How will SKA benefit? Okay. There are many benefits. So I have only listed the exploration and understanding of the humanity as a collective group. But apart from that, SKA is in terms of, so we can list in terms of various headings. So the first advantage will be in terms of technological development. Okay. So the SKA, the design in terms of the material which will be used to build the dishes and so on, they all require, in order to decrease the cost and in order to increase efficiency, the speed of collecting data and so on, various conditions have gone in, and that requires innovation in terms of developing the materials. That is one aspect. Another useful aspect is that there will be the data analysis or the data transfer technology, internet technology. The speed which is required is, you will find in the SKA website, the number quoted is that it will be 100,000 times faster data speed will be required than the global average of internet. Okay, so these conditions, these requirements are pushing technology. I have just cited 2 examples. There will be others that you can find on the website. So it is pushing technology, and all of these will filter back into society as useful. It will improve the quality of life. So this is in terms of technology. The second important aspect that I want to mention is that it will, so I already listed that it improves. I mean, in order to make SKA a success, in terms at the time of building and at the time of utilizing it in the future, upcoming future, utilizing the data, it is going to require collaboration amongst people from all over the world. And that, I believe, and that's a skill. So that is changing the way science is being done. So traditionally, till say 20, 30 years ago, at least till 20, 30 years ago, science was done mostly at most small groups. Most of the science, I'm not saying all, but small groups in small labs. But that is changing now, and that this is collaborating. The entire world has to collaborate, and I believe that this will promote peace and collaboration, mutual respect and understanding. Then the third is, of course, was the topic of my talk. I said that we are going to push the frontiers of knowledge. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, ma'am. I'll move to some other questions. Someone is asking, how accurate are these images?
How accurate are these images?
Yes, ma'am.
Images. So that's a very kind of vague question. I mean, because I did not have any particular image in mind, but I will answer it by saying that it is driven by the physics question or astrophysics question that you are asking. So that question. So, for example, when we measure, let's say, the image of the sun, okay, the sun is not a good example. Maybe an image of a galaxy, and I want to understand the structures inside the galaxy, and I suppose I want to understand what are the correlations between different parts of the galaxy and so on. Okay, so if I ask that question, we know that when we are observing that particular galaxy, there is always instrument noise, and there are different kinds of uncertainties which come in the measurement of that or taking that image. For instance, the person has asked about image, so imaging that particular galaxy. So there is the concept called signal to noise. So we have to reduce the uncertainties because we don't want to be analyzing just things in between. By in between I mean this noise and so on. And so you demand, based on the question that you are asking, you demand that, okay, I require this particular signal to noise, and can I build an instrument which can do that? So my instrument, for example, has to be very, very cool. Okay, it should not randomly, when I'm collecting the signals from that galaxy, it should not inject photons of its own, because maybe it is hot and it is some random fluctuation, it can inject photons, similar photons of similar wavelength. So we don't want that, so you have to make it cool. So these are the kind of things that you have to take care. So I wish that the person who is asking the question, I could ask, we could discuss of a particular specific image, and then we can be more concrete about the question. But yes, you as an astronomer, your question will dictate what is the signal to noise or how accurate it has to be.
Okay, ma'am. Actually, okay. Thank you. And I have one question about the physics goal mainly. Then, after you reconstruct those images of, let's say, star cluster or any galaxy, what's the next step? What do you do then from physics point of view?
Okay, so I did not include a slide for that. Okay, so you collect the data. Now you collect so the data is in the form of, it can be, suppose we are talking about an imaging, okay. So we look in a particular sky direction, so I will have some, say, region of the sky, which is, you can use coordinates in terms of angle, okay, different angle separation, and you have a value or a number for every sky direction. So your data is presented in that form. It's a function on this. So now you have to process the data in such a way that you can relate. So in my talk I mentioned about that your theory is usually we presented, the theory is condensed in the form of an equation, and in that equation we want to compare with observation. So now when we have the data, we have to now put it in the form which is similar to that equation. Okay, so the data has to be put in that form. Then in the theory you will have different parameters, different conditions. So your theory will give you a quantity, and the data will be reprocessed and put in the form of similar quantity, so that the two can be compared. And that comparison is what will say the theory which agrees, the equation which agrees most with this data, the process form, is, you will say, okay, we trust that this is the correct theory. So that is how it goes.
Okay, I got it. Thanks, ma'am. And there is two more questions in Facebook. Does SK answer the questions related to the QCD interaction and the indirect evidence about the QGP matter?
QCD interactions, okay. Yeah, so I had one slide where I was telling about how different matter in the universe interact with each other. So QCD interactions are the ones which are interacting at very short scales, 10 to the power minus 15 meters. So there can be, we cannot directly observe those because we are talking about very big scales, but in extreme conditions, in extremely dense conditions, for example in neutron stars, inside them, because we know that the gravitational force has contracted them to very short distance scales, and so the particles may be so close to each other that maybe it is possible. So then in that case, so those interactions may give out electromagnetic interaction or gravitational wave interaction. So these two can be probed by, so you have to work out under those extreme conditions related to QCD, what are the kinds of electromagnetic forces, at least since I am talking about SKA, which is going to observe electromagnetic radiation. You can estimate what are the electromagnetic range, what frequencies will it emit and so on, and you can try to compare with the theory. Unfortunately, I cannot tell much more than this because I don't know much about this area.
Okay, there is another question. Is there any limit to the universe expansion, or is the universe expected to keep on expanding infinitely?
Okay, so that is, the answer to that is extremely speculative. I think the short answer is that we don't really know. But if we believe, so whether a universe expands or not, so if you have some idea of Einstein's general theory of relativity, whether it expands or not depends on the material. So we know that the expansion is part of the geometry and topology of the universe, and that is determined by what kind of material is present in the universe. Okay, So if the current observations tell us that the universe is accelerating expansion, following accelerated expansion today, and the cause for that is this, what I briefly referred to in the beginning, dark energy. So it basically depends on the nature of dark energy. The answer to that question depends on the nature of dark energy. So if it is something called a cosmological constant, which is a constant, then the universe will just keep on accelerated expansion. It will keep on doing that infinitely. So we need more data to answer that question. Okay, with the limited data we have now, it says it will keep on expanding in an accelerated manner, and it will keep going on.
Okay. We have one question. How will the images of planets help us to study them? You have already answered that. So I'm skipping that, and okay. I don't see any more new question. Okay. Okay, no more question. So I'd like to thank you, Dr. Chingambam, for your lecture and very nice interaction. I hope the audience has got some idea about this, and for details they will definitely visit your website. There they can see the details. I'd like to thank all the participants for showing their curiosity in the frontiers of science. And we have the last lecture on Monday at 4 p.m. So I'd like to end the meeting here. Thank you once again, ma'am.
Thank you, Jim.